So this will be our final class of the semester on this topic of the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And today we'll look at some more examples of the 4th type of mindfulness, mindfulness of phenomena. But let's begin with some more practice of the first of these 4 establishments of mindfulness, the one we learned way back at the beginning of the semester, mindfulness of breathing. So get into a good, comfortable position for meditation. And renew the positive, altruistic motivation that we generated just before in the meditation session. So bring that back into your mind and really try to feel that you're here doing this meditation and learning about the establishments of mindfulness, not just to benefit yourself, although of course it is beneficial for ourselves, but to benefit others as well. If we develop our own minds, our positive potential, and reduce our afflictive emotions, then naturally we'll be more beneficial to others and less likely to harm them. But there are other ways we can benefit others as well, by sharing what we've learned with others so that they too can become more peaceful, positive, less negative and unhappy. And we can also think in a more long-term sense, if you're comfortable with the idea of attaining a higher state of mind, like enlightenment, Buddhahood, and at that point being able to benefit others in unlimited ways, the best possible way. You can also bring that in as part of your motivation for being here, doing this meditation and participating in this class. Then, when you are ready to move your attention to your breathing, just allow your breath to flow in and out in a natural way without controlling it, manipulating it. And then with your mind, your awareness, observe the breath as it's coming in and as it's going out. Do this for each full inhalation and exhalation of each breath, one breath after another. Bring the mind back to the breath anytime it wanders away or is distracted to something else, like a sound or a thought, a memory, an image in the mind. So any object other than the breath, take your mind away from that, detach your mind from that, and return it to the breathing. Remember that all thoughts and memories and sense perceptions and so on are transitory, momentary, like clouds in the sky. They appear and they disappear. We don't have to pay attention to them. We can just notice them, let them go, and stay with the breath coming in and going out. And while keeping the main focus of your awareness on the breath flowing in and out, and also expand your awareness to the whole body, just having this awareness of the breath happening within the body, and letting the whole body become calm, the body and the mind becoming calm as you're just sitting there observing the breath flowing in and flowing out, not letting the mind wander to anything else, the past, the future, other objects. So last week we were going through the 5 hindrances. This was the first group of phenomena in the mindfulness of phenomena. So these 5 hindrances are all mental factors, and they are obstacles to concentration and developing insight into reality. So any of these 5 could arise while we're meditating, for example, and disturb our meditation. And it's important to know what they are so that we can recognize them, identify them when they're there, and know, oh, this is a hindrance, and know how to deal with it. Otherwise, our meditation won't go very well. We won't be able to progress. And we might even get very frustrated because we find it so difficult. And so it's very helpful to know about these hindrances so we can identify them and deal with them skillfully. And last week we looked at the first 3 of the 5, which were sense desire. That's when our mind is distracted by objects of the senses that we might perceive while we're meditating, like hearing some pleasant sound or some unpleasant sound, and getting distracted by that, or just remembering some pleasant experience that we had, and then again the desire comes up and we want to be back in that moment and have that experience again. So it's very distracting, very disturbing to our concentration. And then ill will, another one, ill will, which is related to aversion, anger, and it could take the form of actually wanting to do something hurtful to somebody, or it could just be a feeling of dislike and irritation, annoyance, like there's some noise that we don't like and we get all obsessed with that and can't let go of it and just ignore it and carry on. So that's also very disturbing when it arises in our meditation. And then the third one we looked at is actually 2 in 1, restlessness and regret. I'm not sure why they're put together, but maybe because they have a similar effect on the mind. They make the mind agitated. So restlessness is kind of agitation, mostly due to excitement, attachment. And regret is agitation due to some kind of anxiety about something we did or didn't do that we should have done, and feeling bad about that and worrying about that. So we looked at antidotes to those. Okay, so now we have 2 more to look at. The next one is number 2 on your chart. This also has 2 in 1. Here it says lethargy and sleepiness. In some other books, they're called sloth and torpor. So let's look at what they are. Lethargy, this can be both on the physical level and on the mental level. So physically, it's when we have a lack of energy and stamina. We just feel kind of heavy and not energetic. And mentally, it's also a kind of heaviness and lack of energy. Mind is dull and unclear and just not very energized. So this can happen on a hot day after a big meal. So if we think of that kind of experience, then that's probably lethargy. So we can feel bored and not interested in exerting ourselves and doing anything constructive, just blah. So that's lethargy. And then sleepiness, I think we know very well, that's when we're on our way to falling asleep. And it seems that they're connected. It seems like lethargy comes first, and then if it continues without any counteraction, then it can turn into sleepiness. So it's even possible to fall asleep while sitting up. I've had it happen. So these are hindrances to meditation. They can be hindrances to other things that we may be doing as well, concentrating on work or reading or writing or whatever. So first we need to recognize them when they're there and understand that they are problematic to our meditation, because if we don't take care of them, they'll get worse and we might even completely fall asleep. So some things we can do are to kind of rouse ourselves, rouse our energy by, if this is happening in meditation, you can open your eyes. We're already advised to have our eyes partially open when we meditate to prevent these kind of problems. And so you can even open them more than you have been. I'll sometimes, have my eyes pretty wide open and just staring at a point in front of me on the table or floor or whatever. Don't be looking around, but just focus on one place. So having the eyes open does help to prevent these problems. And also sitting up straight, because if our body's slouched, then I think that also brings our energy down. Sitting up will bring our energy up. And another recommendation is to visualize light. So imagine light. You might imagine your head full of light or your whole body full of light. So that might help. Another thing that's recommended is contemplating uplifting topics, such as the preciousness of our human life, how fortunate we are with this life, the situation that we have, to do beneficial things, to learn spiritual teachings and so on. Or the qualities of the Buddha and our own Buddha nature, that we have the potential to attain those same qualities and become just like the Buddha. Or the good results that can come from meditation. So if you do meditate well, skillfully, then you'll be able to achieve these good results. So those are some things that can uplift our energy. And if none of these things work, then it's recommended that we just take a break from our meditation, stand up, do some stretching, or even walk around a little bit, splash cold water on your face. Just take a break and try to wake yourself up, and then come back and sit down and try again, and you'll probably find you're not as sleepy as before. Because it is just a temporary experience. It isn't that it's going to go on and on and on and get worse and worse and worse, but it's just a passing thing. So if you could just resist it and overcome it, then you'll find your energy returning. Okay, then the last of these 5 hindrances is doubt. And we went through this recently in our class on Monday when we were going through the 6 root afflictions. There it was called deluded doubt, because generally doubt isn't a negative thing. We're supposed to question the teachings, examine them, explore them, understand them for ourselves, rather than just blindly believing them because the Buddha said so or our teacher said so. We're supposed to investigate them. And so a certain amount of doubt is helpful. But doubt can also be disturbing if it continues and we don't resolve it, we don't explore it, we don't resolve it. And it can be a hindrance in our meditation, because we might, we start thinking, well, is there really such a thing as enlightenment or liberation, or these beneficial results of meditation that other people, maybe they're just making them up. Maybe it's just myths and not really true. Maybe there's nothing beneficial that will come of meditation. And those kind of thoughts can arise in our mind, and then we can get stuck in our meditation, because it becomes difficult to have the energy to continue and go forward if we're not even sure that this is worthwhile. This actually happened once to me. I was I had been living in India and teaching introductory courses to groups of mostly Western people, and teaching them basics of Buddhism and meditation. And I've been doing that for quite a few months. And in these courses, people often ask a lot of questions, and they often express doubts and uncertainty. And sometimes I found it difficult answering their questions because I don't have a background in science. So they'd be asking questions about the mind and, oh, but the mind is just coming from the brain and it ceases when we die and things like that. So sometimes had difficulty answering their questions because I didn't have the knowledge in science to deal with what they were expressing. So at a certain point, I found myself having doubt, wondering, well, maybe the scientists are right. Maybe, there is no continuation of the mind beyond death. Maybe the Buddhists have it wrong. So these thoughts were going through my mind, and it really affected my meditation. I was actually in Bodh, where I normally feel a lot of energy to meditate, because that's where the Buddha attained enlightenment. But I'd be sitting there meditating, and these doubts would come up, and I thought, maybe all this is just nonsense. It's not true. So it was really problematic. And unfortunately, Yangtze Rinpoche happened to be there. He was there in Bodh as well. And I went and talked to him. And it just helped talking to a teacher, someone with a real depth and expanse of knowledge and experience. And he was just very, very kind and reassuring. And also just being in his presence and seeing, this is the result of meditation. This is proof that meditation works. You become like that. And I was thinking of some stories that I've heard of scientists, people who have this other view of, oh no, there's no mind after death, it's just the brain, and how people who have that kind of view, the way they behave, the way they live, they can be quite unethical people and even do, even commit crimes or abusive behavior. So I just thought that if you live with that kind of view, there's only this life and then everything ends, then there's not a whole lot of incentive to work on yourself and transform yourself and be a good person. On the other hand, with the Buddhist view of continuation of the mind after death, and that everything we do will have results that we'll experience in the future, with that view, you become a much kinder and more ethical and wiser person. So anyway, those are thoughts that help me get out of that state of doubt. But yeah, I did have my experience of how it can be a hindrance in meditation. So if doubt does come up, try not to get stuck in it. Try to resolve your doubts, talk with teachers, talk with fellow students, do more research, do more careful thinking about where the doubt is coming from, rather than just believing in the doubt. But why do I have this doubt? Do I have any proof for what I'm thinking in this doubt? And so try to find a solution to get yourself out of that state of doubt. It's also helpful to remember that it's impermanent. It's just a temporary, just thoughts in the mind, not who you are. And also to realize that there are times when you don't have that doubt, that kind of doubt isn't there. There are times when you feel certain and confident in the benefit of meditation. So, those are some things to do about doubt. And so in the practice of mindfulness, we need to recognize when doubt is there, but also recognize when it's absent, so that we're able to differentiate the two states of mind, with and without doubt. And there's times, like I say, when we not only are we free of doubt, but we even have strong faith, confidence, energy, inspiration to continue practicing. So those are the 5 hindrances. And in Joseph Goldstein's book, he mentions an analogy given by the Buddha, a simile, to describe how these five hindrances affect our mind. And so he uses the analogy of a pool of clear water. So he says, when sense desire is present in the mind, it is as if the pool were suffused with a colored dye. Desires color our perception. So they distort our perception, making things appear different than they really are. When aversion is present, it is like boiling water. We can't see clearly. When we're heated up by anger, we're in a state of turbulence. So I think that's very true. It's like boiling water is not calm, it's bubbling away. So our mind is a bit like that when we're angry. It's not peaceful and difficult to see things clearly. Sloth and torpor, or what we call lethargy and sleepiness, are like the pool overgrown with algae. There is a stagnation of mind that prevents us from seeing clearly. And then restlessness and regret are like water when it's stirred up by the wind. The mind is tossed about by the agitation. It's not calm and cool and clear, able to see things clearly. And doubt is like muddy water, where we can't see to the bottom and everything is obscured. So if we observe our mind when any of these hindrances are present, then we might recognize what the Buddha is describing here. And on the other hand, if our mind is free of these hindrances, then it's like a very calm pool of water. And when the water is calm, we're able to see clearly into the water and down to the bottom and whatever is there. And so with a clear state of mind, we can see reality more clearly. And then just a bit more about the five hindrances. The Buddha reminds us that abandoning these hindrances is a necessary step on the path of awakening. He said that when attended to carelessly, these five hindrances are makers of blindness, causing lack of vision, causing lack of knowledge, detrimental to wisdom, tending to vexation, leading away from nirvana. So when we don't deal with them, when they arise in our mind and we just let them happen, then these are the problems that will happen. But when we attend to these states of mind carefully, we learn to see into their empty, transparent nature and no longer get so caught up in their seductive power. Then they become the focus of our mindfulness and the very vehicle of our awakening. So we can't expect to not have these hindrances happening in our mind. We can't just make them disappear. They will arise, they will occur, but what we do with mindfulness is notice them, pay attention to them, so that we recognize when they're there, and we can also recognize how they affect us in adverse ways. And we can also learn to deal with them skillfully, not get caught up in them, use antidotes, counter forces to them, and also just observing them with mindfulness, like taking a step back and observing that particular state of mind rather than being caught up in it. And we might notice that with that strong mind of mindfulness, attention, they will just pass by themselves. So we make them objects of our mindfulness rather than getting upset. Oh no, there's doubt again. Why is doubt in the mind? That doesn't help. It doesn't help to get upset about it, but just observe it with mindfulness. Remember, it's impermanent. Something comes and goes. It's not who you are. There are reasons, causes, and conditions why it arises. It's not going to be there forever, and so on. So these are ways in which we use mindfulness and gain more understanding, more insight into these states of mind. So I thought it would be nice to look at another group of phenomena that are objects of mindfulness of phenomena. These are called the 7 awakening factors. I sent you a file just briefly explaining these. So I hope you had a chance to read it. So these are also mental factors, but they are constructive ones. They are ones that help us on the path. So they are ones that we want to develop, to cultivate, to have more of. And the reason they're called awakening factors is because they are causes for awakening or for enlightenment. And it seems that they arise as a result of practicing the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So as a person gets more experience practicing all 4 of the foundation establishments of mindfulness, the body, feelings, mind, and phenomena, then these 7 awakening factors will arise, it seems kind of naturally. And there's also a progression in that the first of the 7, when that becomes stronger, then that leads to the second one, and when that gets stronger, it leads to the third, and so on. So they rise in a progressive way. Also, the Buddha called them anti-hindrances because they counteract the hindrances, like the 5 hindrances that we just went through, that keep us in a state of delusion and suffering. So these are like constructive, positive, beneficial states of mind that help us overcome the disturbing, obstructive, problematic states of mind. So we won't have time to go through every word of the file that I sent you. I'll just kind of focus on the main points. So there's a list of the 7. So the 7 are mindfulness, investigation or discrimination of phenomena, effort or energy, joy, appliancy or tranquility. There's different ways that these are translated. Concentration and equanimity. And there's, the sutra explains how to practice mindfulness with each one. So how do we practice mindfulness with each of these 7 factors? And there's a 3-step practice. The first one is knowing when that particular factor is present in the mind, being able to recognize when it's there, and also knowing when it's absent. So that's kind of a theme we've been looking at the last couple of weeks with different states of mind. Recognizing when that is present, recognizing when it's not. And the second step is understanding the causes that make it arise in the mind. So what are the causes and conditions for that to arise, so that if we want to cultivate it, develop it, have it more often and more strongly in our mind, we focus on creating those causes. And then the third is understanding how it is brought to fulfillment once it has arisen. Okay, so the first of the 7 is mindfulness, the awakening factor of mindfulness. So it says here, the Buddha gave the word mindfulness a special meaning that includes not only memory, because the term for mindfulness also has the meaning of memory, just remembering something. And it does have that meaning in the Dharma, because we need to remember the teachings that we've heard, remember advice that we've received, remember instructions like how to meditate, what should we do when we meditate, what should we do when we fall asleep, and so on. So just keeping those things in mind so that we don't forget them. So that is one meaning of the term mindfulness. But another meaning used in Buddhism is mindfulness of things that are occurring in the present. Okay, so that's more like in kind of contemporary popular understanding of mindfulness. It's being aware of what's happening in the present, each moment. And so both of these meanings pertain to the mindfulness awakening factor. So both remembering, like remembering the teachings, and also being aware of the present. And so mindfulness is something that one has been developing all along, like from the very beginning of practicing the 4 establishments of mindfulness, starting with the breath. Okay, so one has been developing, cultivating, building up this factor, this mental factor of mindfulness. And then first with the body, and then with the feelings, and then with the mind, and so on. So because one has been working on it and continuing to increase it and rejuvenate it when it was weak, then it's now at the point where it's strong enough to become an awakening factor. So one is very much aware of when it's there, when it's functioning well, and when it's absent or slacking. So, yeah, so having practiced mindfulness over a long period of time, again and again, it's now strong enough to be an awakening factor, a factor that is the cause for our awakening, our enlightenment. And the conditions for mindfulness to arise, the main condition is appropriate attention to the body, feelings, mind, and phenomena, those 4 objects. So one has been training in that practice for a long period of time, so one has just a lot of experience, a lot of familiarity with paying attention to body, parts of the body, postures of the body, and so on and so forth, and feelings, and then mind and phenomena. So continuing to pay attention in an appropriate way to those objects is the main condition for mindfulness. But other conditions are trying to keep it going during the day, not just when we're meditating, but in our other activities, working, walking, talking, when we're with people, when we're alone, and so on. So trying to keep it going as much as possible all throughout the day. Also associating with people who are mindful and want to cultivate mindfulness. So that's really important, as we just looked at in those 6 factors that cause delusions to arise. So one factor is the influence of other people. We're easily affected by the people we spend time with. And so if we can spend time with people who have mindfulness, they're cultivating mindfulness, practicing mindfulness, they have good, strong mindfulness, then that will help us also to be more mindful. And the second awakening factor is, in some books it's called investigation or discrimination of phenomena. So this is explained as knowing clearly what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned. So this arises from mindfulness. As we cultivate more and more and more mindfulness and introspective awareness, we come to see more clearly what kind of actions, what kind of thoughts, feelings, and so on are positive and constructive and lead to happiness and lead to spiritual growth, and which ones are not positive or destructive, negative, and lead to suffering and problems. So this becomes more and more clear to us. If I get angry, it has all these adverse results, adverse effects on myself and other people. So I can see that as a negative thing, a hindrance, something I want to overcome. But loving kindness, being kind and compassionate and caring for others, that's really positive. That has so many good effects on me and on others, so I want to cultivate that more and more and more. So this is something that just comes through our own experience through practicing mindfulness and observing the effects of these different states of mind. And so that's this factor. It's the ability to discriminate, to discern, to understand what is helpful, what is harmful, what is to be practiced, what is to be avoided. So it's a kind of wisdom, kind of discriminating wisdom. Yeah, so there are a couple of examples in Bhante Gunaratana's book about this. So he says, for instance, when a thought arises, we investigate to see whether it is spiritually beneficial. We ask, does this thought reduce my greed or hatred, or does it increase them? Does it minimize my confusion or add to it? Does it make me and others peaceful? If we discover that the thought increases greed, hatred, and delusion and destroys peace and happiness, we ask, what can I do to eliminate it? If we discover that the thought is wholesome, we ask, what can I do to maintain it? Is my mindfulness sufficient? If not, how can I improve it? Just an example of using this particular factor of discrimination. I mean, we do rely on the Buddhist teachings, the teachings of our teachers about which factors are helpful and which are harmful. But it's more powerful if we can see that for ourselves. If we can have our own first-hand recognition of which, certain states of mind benefit, others are harmful. Because then we ourselves, from our side, will really want to work on that, decreasing the unwholesome ones, increasing the wholesome ones. And also, it says here, gradually, this ability to discriminate will develop further and can be used to understand the specific characteristics of phenomena, and also their shared characteristics, like being impermanent. Those three characteristics: impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. So ultimately, this factor of mind goes beyond just seeing what's virtuous and non-virtuous, but also into the actual nature of things. And it mentions some other conditions for cultivating this state of mind, such as deep reflection and asking questions. So being inquisitive, being curious, wanting to know more, and really understanding things clearly. Associating with wise people. So again, very important. The people we associate with, people who have this kind of quality and are, very assiduous in their learning and practice. And having the inclination and resolve to cultivate such wise discrimination. So recognizing that this is a positive quality to have and really working on cultivating it. The third awakening factor is called effort or energy, and this arises kind of naturally from the previous two. So with mindfulness, we become more aware of what's virtuous and non-virtuous. We have a greater sense of that, and that will in turn lead to energy or enthusiasm to want to do what's virtuous, to create these causes of happiness and peace and spiritual growth, and overcome what is non-virtuous. So it seems like this is something that will just arise naturally from the previous two. But also other conditions for it are, I won't go through all of them, reflecting on the disadvantages and dangers of samsara. So we went through that earlier. What is samsara? What are the different kinds of suffering and problems in samsara, the causes of samsara. So just being really clear that the situation of samsara we're stuck in is very undesirable, very imperfect, very problematic. It's having strong desire to get out. Also understanding the benefits of effort and energy that's directed in an appropriate way, not to playing football or making money, but putting our effort and energy into things that are really constructive for ourselves and others, and especially in long-term sense. And the great qualities of the Dharma, being clear about that. Also avoiding people who are lazy and associating with those who put energy into Dharma practice can also help. Yeah, so again, being careful about who we spend time with and trying to not spend time with people who are lazy or who have bad habits, who are not interested in transforming themselves and spiritual practice and so on. Okay, number 4 is joy. So this shouldn't be confused with ordinary joy, like the excitement we feel if we're going on a holiday, we're going to some really cool, exciting place, or we're going to have a party with our family and friends, so that we have a certain amount of joy or excitement about that kind of thing. So here, it's not that kind of joy. So here, it's joy that arises from practice, from Dharma practice, doing what is beneficial and avoiding what is harmful. And it arises kind of naturally because, because we're avoiding harmful things, then and doing more positive, beneficial things, those naturally bring joy. We feel happy, we feel good about what we're doing, and we have less to feel regret about. Because if we're doing a lot of unwholesome things, negative things, then our mind's going to be feeling not so good and worried and anxious and full of regret and remorse, and those are not conditions for joy. So it just comes naturally the more we apply ourselves to virtue. And again, it arises from the previous conditions, from the first 3, mindfulness and discrimination, and then energy. So we're putting our energy into doing what's beneficial, avoiding what's not beneficial. So then joy comes about as a result of that. And it mentions a few other conditions for joy. Recollecting the 3 jewels, remembering the good qualities of the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We're going to spend time doing that in the retreat coming up. And the benefits of ethical conduct, avoiding confused people, and associating with those who have good values. So that may sound a little uncompassionate, avoiding confused people. I don't think it means we should totally avoid them. I'm sure many of your patients are confused people. But not spending too much time with them. I've had some experiences like in Buddhist centers, sometimes very confused, mentally ill people will come. And I do find that, spending time with people like that has an adverse effect on my mind. Unless you have skill and you know how to deal with them and you can help them, then fine. But just to be around them and listen to them and observe their energy, it can be quite disturbing. So it's better not to spend too much time with people like that unless you're doing it in a way that is benefiting them. And trying to be with people who have more clear minds and positive qualities and are doing positive things, because that will be beneficial for your own focus on doing positive things. Number 5 is appliancy or tranquility. So joy is something that can be enticing. We can get it kind of attached to it, and it can also kind of agitate the mind. When there's joy in the mind's a little bit excited, not very calm. And so here it says one can recognize how joy can agitate the mind in subtle ways. By releasing attachment to joy and bringing the mind back to the meditation object, joy settles down and bliss arises. And this is more calm and peaceful and enables the mind to settle deeply on the meditation object. At this time, physical and mental pliancy or tranquility arise. Okay, so joy is a little bit uplifting, but too much so. So it's good to come down a bit and abide in a more tranquil, peaceful state of mind where you're really focused on the meditation object. Yeah, it's also helpful to remember impermanence, the impermanence of joy, and how it depends on causes and conditions. That can help us to avoid being attached to it. And other conditions for pliancy include being skilled in meditation. So we have to be able to observe our mind when we're meditating and bring it back to a state of balance. If it gets too excited, and that's not too helpful. Too dull or sleepy is not too helpful. So being able to know how to keep the mind in a balanced state so it stays on its meditation object. Also, avoiding people who are restless and associating with those who are tranquil. Those are also helpful conditions. Okay, number 6 is concentration. So this is the ability to keep the mind focused on the object. And this arises from the previous one, tranquility or pliancy. So having that experience enables our mind to stay focused on our object and bring about deeper concentration. And then number 7 is equanimity. So as concentration deepens, equanimity has already been there, but it now becomes prominent. So this mental factor observes the meditation object without fluctuating. The mind stops going up and down, being too restless or too dull. So it arises from appropriate attention to overcoming faults of meditation and cultivating the conditions for serenity. Okay, so this has been just a very brief introduction to these 7. And in Joseph Goldstein's book, which is called Mindfulness, A Practical Guide to Awakening, this is a great book. It has a whole chapter on each of these 7. So if you really want to know more about them, then that's a good resource. But I just thought it would be nice to talk about these 7 factors because they're very positive. And much of the time in this semester, we've been focusing on kind of negative things like all the different kinds of dukkha or suffering, and then the causes of suffering, all the afflictive states of mind. There's been so much information about the kind of negative side of our experience, so it's good to look at something positive and constructive. And we probably do have these 7 factors to a small extent, and just to know that they can be cultivated further and brought into the path and become aids to our attainment of enlightenment. So in this Wednesday class, we've been looking at these 4 establishments of mindfulness, and you can see there's a huge amount of material. We haven't been able to cover all of it. And some of you might even be feeling overwhelmed by all that you have learned. So I hope I haven't overloaded you. But I think one benefit is just to recognize that mindfulness is a huge topic. And it's a lot more than just being in the present moment, which is kind of the contemporary popular understanding of what mindfulness is. It's a lot more than that in Buddhism. And so there's many, many things to be mindful of, and many tools to increase mindfulness and purify mindfulness and overcome hindrances to it. And also please remember the real point of practicing these 4 establishments of mindfulness is to gain insight into reality, the true nature of things, such as those 3 characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, and selflessness, so that we can free ourselves from dukkha and its causes, and then be of greater benefit to others. So I think if you're inspired to practice mindfulness more, you could start with, the early practices we learn, mindfulness of the breathing, and there's a lot you can practice just with regard to that. And we have the retreat coming up, so during the retreat, there's a very conducive situation to do more meditation, so that's something you could do during the meditation sessions, mindfulness of the breathing. And you might want to explore some of the other practices we learned in the beginning, like being aware of the postures of the body and the movements of the body. When you're sitting, know that you're sitting. When you're walking, know that you're walking, and so on. And also feelings, that's also a really, really important practice, just to become more mindful of our feelings and how, if we're not careful, they can lead to afflictive emotions. So, yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed teaching this subject. It's helped me learn more about it, so I hope you've enjoyed it as well. And yeah, it is a huge topic, but very meaningful, very valuable, very beneficial. So we'll stop there and make a dedication of the positive energy from coming together, doing meditation, and looking at more information about the practice of mindfulness, the establishments of mindfulness. So let's share this merit, this positive energy with all other living beings. May it help all of them meet with these teachings, contact these teachings, and start practicing them so that they can work on their minds and bring about a positive transformation of the minds, decreasing the disturbing, painful, problematic aspects of the mind, increasing the positive, beneficial aspects of the mind. And eventually may it bring all of us to the state of full enlightenment, Buddhahood. Thank you.